Alright, everybody, what's going on? Sorry I'm late. Sorry I'm late. I am 18 minutes late. I apologize. It is 10:48 p.m. here on the East Coast. It is 75 degrees, mostly cloudy. It is not raining, but it is cloudy outside, y'all. But it is very, 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 very beautiful. We have some breaking news coming out of Russia and Ukraine war. We also have news coming out of Washington. Seems like Trump refused to sign the affordable housing bill. So he said that he's not going to be signing the affordable housing bill for us until they actually pass his bill. So we're going to see how far this goes. I'm not sure what's going on. All this little kid stuff needs to be left behind, and business needs to be taken care of. This is ridiculous what the housing rate and everything else is going on right now. $2,000-$3,000 a month for rent is insane. Just saying. I know that many families would love to have more affordable housing. But, I mean, they just need to start passing bills for the American people and not for themselves. And not for the wealthy. And they need to get this stuff straightened out. And hopefully lower the taxes a little bit. What if the interest rate? Come on. Too late, pal. We got to do something here. I mean, something's got to start popping up, or something's got to happen. But welcome to the show, y'all. This is the Lone Wolf. We have a lot going on tonight, y'all, as you can tell. But before we get started, make sure y'all hit that bell button so y'all get notified whenever we come on air. Apologize that I have not been on air. We have been very, very busy taking care of a few stuff. Phone lines will be open momentarily. But anyways, before we get started with the show, make sure y'all hit that bell button, like I said, and hit that follow and subscribe button so y'all know when we come on air. The phone lines are now open. 540-251-7687. Call in and get your voice heard. Call in and actually talk about the show. Just call in. Just call me. Okay, I will not ever do that again on the show. Promise. But anywho, but further ado, let's get to the news.
And tonight we have very big news coming out of Ukraine and Russia. Right now we're seeing the Russians are fleeing en masse from Crimea, and way worse than previous days, as food shortages have just appeared today across Crimea, and also widespread blackouts are worsening across the Isle of Crimea. We're also seeing that Moscow is under a massive drone attack right now at this very hour, and also a very groundbreaking story today. Ukrainian forces have begun an advance near the Zaporizhzhia region, and also the Kinburn Spit is officially Ukrainian territory yet again. And it's good to see you all once more.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant amounts of developments within the war in Ukraine and also other regions around the world, including the Middle East and also the Mediterranean, as well as the Americas over the course of the day, as significant news has emerged from the area of Crimea that the Ukrainian armed forces are still continuing significant attacks within the area, and just north of the Crimean Peninsula, we have also seen that the Ukrainian armed forces had been able to retake the town of Kamyanske, a significant jumping point for the Russian Federation's armed forces and their hopes of eventually pushing their offensive into the city of Zaporizhzhia, one of the largest and most important cities in Ukraine in this area of the country. We have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces took ground inside the Kinburn Spit as well, as the 337th Regiment of the Russian Army has largely finalized its advance, and its last remaining elements have been removed from the entirety of the Kinburn Spit. These major offensive victories victories, for the larger part, are being seen in the midst of the supply line shortages and critical failings of the logistics systems that the Russian Federation's armed forces and occupational areas rely on to be able to keep functioning and operating as far as the war is concerned. We have also been able to see that additionally, Ukrainian armed forces have been continuing their strikes inside of the areas of the Kinburn Spit on the remaining elements of the 337th, farthest to the east of the Spit, basically near to the area of Olapristan, and we've also seen that a large amount of Russians, in the tens of thousands it seems, are still fleeing Crimea, with a 10-kilometer long traffic jam in every single lane leading up to the Kerch Bridge being seen on satellite footage today. Ukrainian drone forces did continue attacks against the area of the Kerch Bridge, and we've also been able to see that other attacks have been conducted around the area of Sevastopol, with most of the city still largely knocked out of power. We've also seen that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has spoken openly about the situation inside the Crimean Peninsula and Ukraine's attacks and their larger objectives and goals with these attacks over the course of the day. We've also been able to hear that the Crimean energy authorities are still stating that rolling blackouts are going to be becoming a lot more common, and they will in fact even be ramping up further the mandated blackouts that will be conducted across the whole of the power grid to try and conserve fuel and also energy consumption metrics peninsula-wide. At the same time, drone attacks have been conducted once again in earnest against the city of Moscow and Tula over the course of the day, with other major hits being seen on refineries within the Bashkortostan province near to the city of Ufa. We also got additional news that a Yars intercontinental ballistic missile and its transport-erector launcher were on the move today in the area of Yoshkar-Ola, within the area just north of Kazan, and additionally, the Russian mobilizations appear to be continuing within the Penza Oblast, which is the only area of the Russian Federation that we've seen so far enter a state of what appears to be mandatory conscription. Gas lines have also been spotted throughout most of the Russian Federation once again, including in the cities of Saratov and Irkutsk, with the fuel lines spanning several miles from their beginning to the actual gas stations, which still are quite limited on their availability of gas. Ukrainian armed forces have also been inflicting significant casualties onto the Russian armed forces, generally stopping most if not all advances over the course of the day within these areas. We've also been able to see that the Russian Federation did try and retaliate against Ukrainian attacks last night by launching several Iskander and Zircon hypersonic missiles at the state of Ukraine, and particularly the capital of Kyiv. It does appear that Patriot air defense interceptors, with the very little munitions that they have left, were able to successfully intercept and shoot down both Zircon hypersonic missiles, once again showing that Russian hypersonics are not what they've cracked up to be, at least according to the statements by the Russian government. We've also been able to hear that Zelensky has stated that they will be conducting a 40-day campaign to try and force the Russians into ending the war, and we've also seen that Alexander Syrsky has stated that they are raising more brigades of the Ukrainian armed forces to be able to deal with the eventuality of possible threats coming from the Belarusian border area. We've also been able to hear further details about the situation between Ukraine and Lukashenko, as it's now been stated by the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, that apparently the Ukrainians actually sent a delegation to Minsk and apparently threatened Lukashenko to some degree in person about what was going to happen, and therefore that's the reason why Lukashenko has largely backed off. And Lukashenko has reiterated that the Belarusians love peace, they're like the dove, and they don't want any conflict with the Ukrainians whatsoever to speak of. We've also been able to hear additional word today from the Mediterranean that the French Marines and also the French Navy were involved in an operation to seize a Russian shadow tanker, and so far we have not been able to see that the Russians have made any official response. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear that, according to the NATO Secretary General, new contracts in the defense industry are soon to be announced that are apparently going to be amounting in any amounts higher than the tens of billions. Inside of the Americas today, we've also been able to hear that Southcom is now preparing for some sort of a military mobilization to head to Venezuela to help with the recovery efforts inside of the country, as the death toll has already reached the hundreds, as confirmed by Venezuelan authorities. We've also seen that it appears that a refinery along the coastline near to the city of Moron is apparently leaking oil into the sea as a result of the damage that was caused to the refinery by the significant 7.5 magnitude earthquake that just rocked central northern Venezuela overnight. Additionally, we've also been able to hear that the official foreign policy change has been made through the U.S. Department of State, where the United States is now stating that it officially supports the Ukrainian position in the conflict against the Russian Federation, and that they will no longer be taking the position as a neutral mediator attempting to end the conflict through a third-party negotiation, which which is a significant change in U.S. foreign policy that we have seen since the new administration has taken charge in January of 2025, which has largely tried to take a position of neutrality on the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, things are certainly not remaining neutral, as the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted its first attack against a merchant ship today that was transiting the Omani water passage through the Strait of Hormuz, as it is stated that the negotiations are going sour and the continued Israeli attacks against Hezbollah forces in Lebanon are jeopardizing the security of the entire deal. They have threatened that unless the United States of America finds some way to force the Israelis to stop their attacks in southern Lebanon, the entire peace deal will collapse and a state of war will resume between the both sides. On the other hand, the Vice President of the United States has stated that significant progress is being made and there's only windfall victories to be had for the United States of America. However, the Iranians, on the other hand, are stating that a multitude of the U.S.'s statements publicly do not represent the real situation of the negotiations, and have claimed that they will not be allowing any inspections of nuclear facilities within the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they will also continue the hardline on all of their positions in the peace talks that were laid out in the Memorandum of Understanding. Additional word has been seen as well that the IMO has also stopped evacuating ships from the Persian Gulf today as a result of the strikes that the Iranians conducted, and as of this moment right now, we can still see that some traffic is continuing to pass through the strait, both in the Omani waterways and the Iranian waterways, but we're not seeing at the moment the significant volume of passages that we saw earlier in the day when the strike was just conducted, showing that traffic is once again already starting to creep down to a slower crawl. But we have quite a significant amount of news to cover over the course of this day, and we are going to be making sure to get into each and every single bit of it, starting with our largest stories of the day, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And suffice it to say that today is quite a significant news day, and in basically every front, we're seeing significant developments in one form or another in most every region, and we're going to be making sure to get into it, starting with that largest story, which is going to be moving us on and directly into the southern front of Ukraine. As many of y'all know, the southern front of Ukraine has been facing significant logistical issues for the Russian army, as the Ukrainian medium-range attack drones have been causing untold damage against Russian supply trucks and supply tonnage making it to their end distribution points along the M14 highway and along the E105 highway into Crimea. Due to attacks on critical infrastructure systems such as bridges, most of the accesses into Crimea have largely been knocked out, and we're seeing that the flow of trucks is still continuing at a crawl due to a single Russian pontoon bridge that exists within the Chonhar area, but outside of that, most supply flows into Crimea have ended. Most importantly, supply flows into the Kherson Oblast have also started to bleed away as well, about as badly as Crimea. It's just that it's largely not reported as heavily and not as documented, because there are not as many civilians living inside of Kherson as there is in Crimea that have the ability to be able to film what's going on and then publish that onto the internet. The supply situation also appears to be quite grim within the Zaporizhzhia region, and while a large amount of its supply tonnage is also being interdicted and destroyed by Ukrainian medium-range drone attacks, its position is slightly better from what we can tell than the position of the Kherson Oblast and the Crimean Oblast, which have continued to be under significant attacks by Ukrainian long-range drone forces and have largely deprived both of those regions of their supplies nearly completely. The Zaporizhzhia region is the one that's important to notice, however, as we did get word this morning that the Ukrainian armed forces are beginning to advance. As we were able to see, the 108th Air Assault Regiment attacked Ukrainian positions and soldiers with drone drop bombs and FPVs in the Plovny area of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and it also appears that this is showing us the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to make a decent amount of ground back into Kamyanske. Kamyanske largely was held by the Russian armed forces for some time here as a significant foothold and a basing. As many of y'all can see here, it is a smaller village within a key area along the E105 highway that allows for a direct access into the city of Zaporizhzhia. In earlier war plans, and largely we believe that these are still the standing war plans as of right now, the Russian Federation largely viewed the E105 highway and Kamyanske by extension as a significant offensive venture towards the city of Zaporizhzhia and its eventual capture as a part of larger Russian war plans. The Russian Federation is claiming at the moment in the present day that they only want the entirety of Donetsk and Luhansk. However, if you ever listen to a lot of Russian governmental statements that are made outside of their mainstream claims, they also include the entirety of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson as a part of their territorial demands at a minimum whenever they're stated outside of a mainstream network or a mainstream news publishing. For this reason, Kamyanske has still held an important offensive position over the course of its recent history, and we have seen the Ukrainian Ukrainian forces have been fighting out of Stebnohirsk towards Plavny to try and make it into Kamyanske. The video today that is showing the Russian Federation's drone forces attacking and hitting Ukrainian armed forces inside of the town of Plavny, which does exist all the way down the coastline of the former Novikakovka Reservoir towards the western side of Kamyanske, and we believe that these strikes are actually happening within the southern area down here directly west of Kamyanske, are actually showing that the Ukrainians are making ground that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense has not spoken about much whatsoever, and we've also seen the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian Armed Forces are largely omitting the fact as well that this is a visible movement southwards of Ukrainian Armed Forces, and it does appear that Russian forces are being uprooted from their holdings in South Plavny and Kamyanske, and the Ukrainians might be pushing them entirely out of the town of Kamyanske and further south towards the town of Vasilivka, which is the Russian redoubt or holdout if the town of Kamyanske is to fall to Ukrainian Armed Forces. This is a fairly significant development, and while it is one that is not getting a lot of coverage around most of the world, it's an important one because it is showing that one of the more important vectors within the southern front in Zaporizhzhia is beginning to be pushed back by the Ukrainian Armed Forces. We believe that this is because the supply situation throughout the whole of the region, which we had also just talked about and summarized just recently, is starting to wane even inside of Zaporizhzhia, and this is making it much harder for the Russian Federation's armed forces to be able to leverage the kind of firepower, maneuverability, and also morale that they may have had, or the lack of morale thereof, to be able to try and hold their positions around Kamyanske and stop the Ukrainians from retaking really their only foothold on the E-105 highway outside of Vasilivka. If the Ukrainians are able to push the Russians entirely out of Vasilivka, the Russians do have small defensive redoubts in Lahove and defensive positions in Verkhnaya Krenista, but it is a very small holdout, and they would mostly be pushed back to Vasilivka and largely back to square one that we saw during the early spring of 2023 when the Russian Federation Armed Forces began their offensive up the highway from Vasilivka and just 7 miles north to Kamyanske, where they still are at this moment right now 3 years later. So it does appear that from this action alone, things are not really looking all too good, at least in the smaller front area, and giving us a little bit of an indicator of the health of the Russian supply lines and the forces as a result. Another important development has also happened today as well in the Kherson region, which is also quite monumental as well. Ukrainian armed forces did plant one of their flags today in the town of Pokrovsky on the very edge of the Kinburn Spit, which we were able to see in this video right here, as it was shown by a Ukrainian armed forces unit, the 801st Ukrainian 801st Combat Dive Center, and also other Ukrainian combined forces that were operating in the area, that they had planted a Ukrainian flag on one of the destroyed buildings within Pokrovsky at the edge of the Kinburn Spit, and are also showing the complete abandonment of the area by the 337th Regiment of the Russian Army, which was the only regiment holding the area of the Kinburn Spit.
That's pretty swell right there, really. You know, we had heard the Russians withdraw from it, but to see the Ukrainian flag now on it, and also the Ukrainians laying waste to the remaining defenses here, that is remarkable, to say the least, and that really puts it to shame for Russia. There's no way they can try to ignore the fact that they had to give this area up at this point, now that Ukraine has planted their flag there. So that's got to be a bit of an embarrassment, to say the least.
It is quite an embarrassment. It really is, because the Kinburn Spit has not really held a lot of strategic significance, at least throughout the war, but it has been a key part of the Kherson front line and an attempt for the Russian Federation to be able to put artillery systems closer to the cities of Mykolaiv and Odessa in brief barrages that they would conduct on both of those cities throughout the course of the war. The fact that they're losing this Kinburn Spit region is also showing us that once again, the Russian supply lines are incredibly weak, and this is also full-blown confirmation that the 337th Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces is in fact retreating out of the area and has left it quite literally practically abandoned. This is something that we have to point out is just extremely crucial as far as our understanding of what's going to be coming here in the future as far as these front lines are concerned. As many of y'all will know, the supply lines have been talked about greatly here on the show, but to try and explain it in a much simpler way, imagine that the supply lines, or largely the Russian front line, is a human body, and the supply lines are the blood vein, or the blood vessels and the blood veins inside of your body that supply blood, oxygen, nutrients, and everything else to your cells to be able to keep your body alive. what we're seeing right now with the Ukrainian attacks, or arteries is probably the best way to say it, blood vessels and veins and whatnot, but with the supply line attacks that we're seeing right now, a lot of that ability to pump the blood of the Russian army, which is their supplies, to its extremities, like its arms and legs, is becoming a lot weaker. And for this reason, we're starting to see what we could call basically atrophy of most of these more exposed and distant frontline areas, like the areas around Kamyanske or the Kinburn Spit. The blood flow is trying to be prioritized to critical functions in critical areas, but other extremities, like the Kinburn Spit and Kamyanske, are already starting to see that their front lines are getting pushed back, or areas are having to be completely abandoned because there's basically no blood flow, in a sense, to those areas to keep those Russian units alive. And when you think about that, it's giving us an idea that if this keeps going, and it certainly is, because we haven't seen the Russians come up with an effective defense to these sorts of supply line attacks that the Ukrainians are conducting right now, this could start to become a serious problem. We could start to see that Russian front lines begin to stagnate and possibly even decay and collapse in real time over the next several months, with this being one of our largest indicators today, seeing that the Ukrainians have now taken a key foothold on the west side of Kamyanske, and we're also seeing that the Russians have abandoned the Kinburn Spit as well. A lot of people are wondering whether this is going to start opening up the floodgates for further frontline losses, once again due to the supply situation or crisis that's now happening in the southern front area. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so let's address the poll first, and then right after this poll, we have some breaking news that has just come out of a recent piece of damage, actually two major pieces of damage that Russia has sustained over the attack that's been occurring since the stream has been started. So jumping into the poll first, reports now indicate that Ukrainian forces have broken through the Russian lines on the Zaporizhzhia front near Kamyanske, and also, not only that, but they've retaken the Kinburn Spit, and they now planted the Ukrainian flag on it at this point too. So today's been a fantastic day for the front line situation for Ukraine. It really has been. And that prediction we made about a week or two ago that the logistics collapse was going to cause a major issue, to say, put it mildly, by the way, for the Russian frontline forces, it is starting to already happen this soon into the game at this point. So what are your thoughts about the whole situation right now? 54% said this recent gain by the Ukrainians in this advance will open the floodgates for the Russian lines to collapse. 28% said this is only a limited collapse, and 8% said this will get overblown. And I would say that right now, I would admit it is a limited collapse as of right this very minute, but the catch is, what started this collapse? What's the real cause of it? And in my opinion, the cause of this Russian failure right now is the fact they can't get ammo, they can't get food, they can't get any type of logistics in large enough amounts to the front lines to support those Russian frontline forces to continue defending against the Ukrainian onslaught. So because of that, and right now there is no solution to it. The Russians are trying to send mobile fire groups to escort the logistics trucks, which has been a huge failure. We've covered that a lot. And also, they're now trying to disguise military logistics as civilian vehicles, which that's not going too well either, because Ukraine's identifying them and hitting those as well. So there's really no solution to it. So in my opinion, while this is a limited collapse right now, I think it will turn into a much larger situation across the entire front. Every single place that's having a logistics failure will be experiencing a similar situation just like this. Just give it enough time and we'll eventually get there. So I think over time, I'm with the 54%. It will open the floodgates, but it is going to take a little extra time to get there. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I would also be with a 28%. I think this is largely starting this the limited collapse that we're seeing right now. And I do want to make it clear, folks, that as of what we're seeing at the moment, these are gains by the Ukrainian armed forces, but they're not breakthrough gains. They're more so smaller gains that are giving us an idea at the health of the Russian front lines relative to their supplies that they're getting. And it is clearly showing that the Russian front lines are far less healthy in a fighting sense and in an upkeep sense than they were several months ago when these attacks started back then. And that's giving us the understanding that while this could eventually open the floodgates, it's not opening the floodgates just yet, but it is giving us an idea that at some point here within the near future, that could certainly start to happen. To try and describe it in a way that would probably be best described, considering that we already used the body example earlier, it's basically like the Russian front lines have taken a bullet and they're bleeding and they're still able to move around and talk, but saying that that front line or that person would continue to move around and talk, having been shot forever, is going to be something of a misnomer. They might be fine now and they might be, getting into the realm of getting in shock from the gun gunshot, but here soon, it will start to become a near mortal or grievous wound for them as the minutes would pass in real life, or for these front lines, as the weeks and months begin to pass and the supply line situation becomes even worse. But with that in mind, we actually have some breaking news coming out right now. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so before we get into that breaking news right there, I will say this. I see a lot of people saying in the chat, it's going to be opening the floodgates, kind of like the way I worded it in the poll as well, by the way. I think it will be that eventually. Like when the front lines start to go, it's going to be very sudden. I don't think it's going to be gradual, because you got to think, if the Russians start to collapse their front lines and the Ukrainians start advancing into that, the Russians will either have to get slaughtered or they'll have to retreat, one or the other. So when that starts to happen, you'll probably see the Russians start pulling back a little bit, and then the panic sets in. That's when the panic sets in amongst the forces, and then that's when Ukraine probably just like plows on through them and starts creating a huger situation for the Russians. So I personally think it's going to be very sudden when it does happen, kind of like we're seeing right now in Kamyansk. We're seeing a very sudden pushback of the Russians, and now they're on the huge defensive right now, trying to fire back at the Ukrainians that are advancing onto them. So, Enforcer, what do you think about that? Will it be a gradual shift, or will it be a pretty sudden one once it starts to happen?
It's going to kind of start chipping away little by little over the next few weeks, probably, and then it's going to go all at once, probably in a couple of months, because that's usually how frontline collapses go, is that once the supply line situation gets bad, they'll try and conserve their ammunition, and they'll try and cut back on offensive actions and largely focus on defensives for as long as they can to try and conserve ammunition, but at some point, everything's just going to run out basically all at once, all at the same time, and then a complete collapse will set in, and the Ukrainians could basically walk across the front line right behind the Russian rear lines at that point with really almost no resistance, and either encircle these units or force them into a rout where they just have to pick up from their positions on foot and just start walking as far back as they can until they either reach some supplies, so that way they can reorganize and try and set up defensive lines wherever they stop their retreat, or they might just end up surrendering before then even, or just getting overrun and basically bushwhacked in the fields as they're trying to make their route off of the battlefield.
Yeah, I would say it could be that case as well. But in the meantime, though, to jump into that breaking news that we have right now this very minute, we are currently seeing two major hits, and they both appear to be in the Tula Oblast of mainland Russia. We're currently seeing that in one city in the Tula Oblast, one of the largest power plants in the area, the Novomoskovsk power plant, has been hit, and it looks like the NASA firm satellite that registers heat is currently picking up a massive heat signature on the location of that power plant. So it looks like power infrastructure is on the menu in the Tula Oblast, and it has been struck by the Ukrainians. So that's a pretty big deal right there. Also, as well in Tula, we're now seeing that the Azot chemical plant has been struck by the Ukrainians again. It appears to be that there's at least one confirmed hit on the Azot plant. There could be more, but the only photo we have of it right now just shows one major hit on it, and that appears to be a pretty strong one. I can't tell if it's in the center of the facility. I really can't tell from the picture we have. But Enforcer, can you take us through these current losses that we're just hearing about?
So this Novomoskovsk Gress thermal power plant, or power plant within the Novomoskovsk area, is a somewhat important one. It does provide electricity to the surrounding energy grid. So we may be seeing that there are rolling blackouts either in Novomoskovsk or Tula, or we may see that there are redundant electrical connections on the grid that are able to feed these areas power, but any additional hits in this larger grid area might create a significant blackout situation where even the backup power into the area might not be enough, and the power lines might get overwhelmed and short out, or just get burned out quite literally from the voltage that they're having to carry over their wires. And we also are seeing that the Azot chemical plant within the Tula Oblast also appears to have been hit again. And if I'm not mistaken, folks, I am pretty sure that the Azot chemical plant is also in Novomoskovsk as well. I'm not really sure where it is exactly relative to Novomoskovsk, but let me go pull that up here real quick. The Azot chemical plant in Tula. And let's see, where is it? It is in Novomoskovsk in the Tula region. So I don't know exactly where it is inside of the town, but let me see here if I can show you all a picture of the building that has been hit. Let's see here. This is the chemical plant right here. It has a very distinctive tower, almost looks like a water tower in this picture, that might make it a little bit easier to find. It also has blue-roofed buildings. So let me see if I can do some quick geolocating here on air and find us any blue-roofed buildings that we could look at and say that that's probably the chemical plant. So there's a blue-roofed building right there. Here's a large complex of blue-roofed buildings. This actually is the place. This is the place right here, because you can actually see that taller tower in the background, and you can also see the water tower structure right here as well. So this is the Azot chemical plant, which has been hit. It's this little complex right here, which looks to be in a larger industrial sector, and then the power plant was also hit over here as well, which has been confirmed on firms. So it looks like 2 hits in the general same industrial sector.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the largest producers, I believe, of ammonia in the area. I think I might be mistaken on that. I'm basing that off my memory right now, so we'll have to see. But it does produce a lot of different chemicals here at this plant. So it looks like Ukraine had possibly a military reason for hitting it that we're currently hearing about. So it appears to be a pretty big one.
Yeah, it does look to be a pretty large hit, and we may be seeing that additional attacks are conducted, because it looks like there are a large amount of industrial centers around this area, including this unknown one here, which looks a lot to me like a gas processing center in Novomoskovsk, which might also be a significant target that we might get news was hit, or we might be seeing that it was avoided in this attack and might get hit in a future one in the next days or weeks to follow. And also over here, where this cloud is, there also appears to be another large facility that looks like it may be producing some form of plastics, but we're not really sure if this facility is involved in any wartime productions or operations for the Russian armed forces, which may say that this facility is spared from any attacks, considering that it has really no military value depending on what it's producing. But these are quite significant attacks, all of them hitting in a focalized area. This is also giving us a clear indication that right now Ukrainian drones are, or at least the swarm, is flying somewhere in between Novomoskovsk and Tula, and it's making its way up the M4 highway right now on into Moscow. If that is the case that we're watching right now, actually, you know what's funny? This is the infamous M4 highway of Prigozhin fame on the Wagner coup, actually. This is the same highway they tried to take to Moscow. So it looks like the drones are actually following that highway right now on up into Moscow. And considering that they made it here within the past several hours, we will probably assume that before our stream is over, those drones might be making their way into the Moscow air defense perimeter again towards the latter end of our stream. So we'll have to wait and see if that begins to occur, or this attack might actually bypass Moscow, and we might not hear of any attacks or air defenses to speak of, and they might be going for targets deeper in the interior of Russia, farther east than Moscow, and farther north as well. But moving us on out of that interesting piece of news that we have just gotten out of the area of the Novomoskovsk Industrial District, it's now time for us to move on down and into Crimea, in the midst of everything that's going on the front lines right now in Novomoskovsk in the Tula Oblast, and everything else. We have been able to see that the Ukrainians have continued their attacks on the Crimean Peninsula. And before we get on into the Crimean Peninsula situation today and the campaign that the Ukrainian drone forces are still conducting, I want to make sure that we read The State of the Peninsula by Volodymyr Zelensky, or at least that's why I'm dubbing it here on the channel, because it largely describes the situation in Crimea in the greatest detail that the Ukrainians have, and they also included some infographics as well about other situations that they're dealing with. But to read y'all all of this, because it is a fairly important read, our intelligence has obtained important findings regarding the situation in Crimea and in our other territories currently under Russian occupation. Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service has obtained data indicating that the crisis with fuel, military logistics, and governance in Crimea is deepening on a virtually daily basis. The Russian Occupation Administration quite clearly and unequivocally acknowledges its inability to resolve the problems created by our mid-range sanctions against the occupier, as well as by implementation of our long-range sanctions plan primarily against Russian oil refining. A similar situation is unfolding in other Russian regions as well. We have also obtained internal Russian documents assessing the public mood among citizens of the aggressor state. At present, the level of anxiety among Russians is already higher than it was during our Kursk operation, more than 50%. Already, 66% of Russians considering their financial situation difficult. More than 80% of Russians believe a large-scale economic crisis in Russia is inevitable. These are absolutely clear indicators that reflect the failure of Putin's war policy. Separately, Oleg Lufovsky reported on measures being carried out in Belarus under obvious Russian influence to prepare for a potential expansion of the aggression against Ukraine. Along our state border in Belarus, the construction of road infrastructure and storage bases for ammunition and fuel and lubricants is nearing completion. These facilities have no purpose other than a military one. These are the border directions of Kobrin, Kovel, Ivanova, Manivichi, Lunanets, Sarini, Rishaya, Korostin, and Homil and Chernihiv. We know that Russian documents describe this specifically in the context of the tasks of the so-called SVO, or the Special Military Operation, as we call it here in America. Belarus has recently received the necessary signals from Ukraine regarding this activity, as well as regarding all other formats of its collaboration with Russia in the interest of prolonging and scaling up the war. Belarus knows what steps it must take for peace. The development of border infrastructure for aggression from Belarus must be stopped. It is the Belarusian side that must take steps towards de-escalation and peace, and thank you for everyone who helps us to protect the lives and independence, and the glory to Ukraine, which was largely the statement by Zelensky today. Outside of the Belarusian statements, which we will be talking about later on during the show, the statements primarily about their attacks on Crimea, or at least Zelensky's statements about the attacks on Crimea, are the more important ones to notice and pay attention to, at least at the moment right now, because we are seeing that a lot of the statements that Zelensky has made are clearly true as far as the situation existing in Crimea. We're assuming that Ukrainian intelligence has a lot more of a fleshed out and refined understanding of the intricacies of what exactly is going on in Crimea, but to give you all the information that we have today, we were able to see that the Crimean energy authorities, or the Crimean Energy Forum, has stated the following about the situation as far as electricity supplies are concerned within the region. Dear Crimeans, at the command of the Chernomorsky Regional Dispatch Office, a branch of the JSC SO-UES, a temporary power supply restriction has been introduced in the Republic of Crimea. This is an emergency measure. It is necessary to prevent overloading the electrical grid and a breakdown in the entire power system. Due to the fact that the decision to disconnect power was made by the system operator, precise hourly schedules for the electrical grid districts are currently unavailable. Disconnections will be carried out on a targeted basis and as needed. The State Unitary Enterprise of the Republic of Crimea, I don't think I can pronounce that one actually, is taking all possible measures to restore a stable power supply. We ask you for your understanding during these temporary difficulties. Once the command to lift the restrictions is received, power will be fully restored.
Ah, yes, the old Soviet phrases here. No panic, civilians. It's only temporary. Just hunker down and trust in the regime, basically. I have a feeling that these temporary outages right here are going to become probably more permanent. That's my guess. I mean, just in Sevastopol alone, there are hundreds of streets inside of Sevastopol itself without power still, even after the blackouts that started a couple of days back. So, it's like, what are the Russians doing to fix it? Once Ukraine hits this stuff, Crimea is an island at this point. It's not like they have the ability to get repairs in there. They really don't.
You're overthinking the situation, comrade. Vladimir Lenin stated that trust in our system is what makes us great Soviets. And therefore, cut the power lines. Stop the spread of disinformation. But what they're saying right here, though, quite clearly, like outside of the joke, is that they have no ability to keep the grid running at all in Crimea anymore, and they're probably going to shut off entire grids probably permanently because of the Ukrainian attacks, and also the fact that if they keep them on, the Ukrainian attacks are diverting electricity elsewhere through the grid, which is going to possibly overload the remaining parts of the system, which would then also subsequently destroy those as well. To tell y'all a little bit about the energy infrastructure and how it works in kind of a simplified way, because I don't know everything about electricity, I'm clearly not an electrician, but to tell y'all a little bit about how high voltage general distribution networks work, there usually are several high voltage lines that lead to a distribution area, and they all carry a bit of the load, but they don't carry a full 100% capacity load of electricity that they could carry. If one of those high voltage lines goes out because a branch touches it and it shorts it out or something else, the other high voltage lines can still carry the electricity in. But if say like they have 3 high voltage lines and it's designed to operate off of 2, if 2 of those high voltage lines go out for some reason or another, the final high voltage line, due to how electricity works, is going to be carrying pretty much all of the load that the 3 would have been carrying before, which usually overloads the power lines and sends the entire region that it was feeding into a complete blackout. You can actually see that something like that happened back up in the day in the mid-2000s up in New England when 2 of the high voltage lines entering the area had been shorted out, and the final high voltage line had actually ended up shorting out itself and then leading the entirety of New York City, Boston, and many other of the major cities in New England into a total blackout. And that's right now what the Crimeans are saying might be happening due to Ukrainian attacks, is that the remaining part of the system could short out and the entire region could go into a multi-day, multi-week, or multi-month-long blackout throughout the whole area. And it sounds like from the breaking news we're getting right now, that might only become permanent. And so, Matthew, what breaking news are we getting from the Kerch area at this moment?
Okay, so jumping away from the electrical thing happening right now in Sevastopol and across Crimea, we're currently getting word right now, this very minute, that the Kerch area is currently under attack. And keep in mind that Kerch is right near the Crimean Bridge. It's literally right there next to it. So right now it looks like the airfield at Kerch has been attacked. It also appears to be that other areas have been attacked next to the airfield as well. There's our first image here on the screen showing some fire out there at the airfield. And based on the NASA firm's data that we're currently seeing on satellite, there's a fire signature coming right from the middle of the airfield. It could be that maybe, I think that might be an air defense system that got hit. It looks like Max 26 is reporting that apparently a Pantsir S1 air defense system was hit, and it looks like the town of Kerch itself might have been hit as well. There's also a fire signature right in the middle of Kerch itself. So I'm not sure what was hit there, but yeah, Kerch is currently under attack. That's literally happening right now.
Let's investigate that. This is a spot. I don't know what that would be. There's nothing out here in this field on what we're able to see here on Google Maps. So maybe it's a Pantsir that was hit here as well. But this is a larger air defense fortification, actually, near to this former airfield here on the western side of Kerch. And it looks like the fire is right on top of it right now from the firm satellite. You can actually see a little bit of it right there. And you can also see it down here on the ground as well. Some of the bunkers, the radar systems, and also the acquisition radars. And it also appears a Pantsir right there, right to the west of that system as well, that may have been hit and is currently on fire, and that may be the one that we have the picture of. There's also something else on fire right down here in this area of the city, which we don't really have a good explanation of, and we also don't have a picture of that fire at the moment yet. But it is quite an interesting thing to note. The Ukrainian drones are starting to reach their targets in this attack, like Kerch and Tula, which are mid-range targets, or at least for the long-range attack forces, right now. We already just heard of the attacks in Novomoskovsk, and now we're seeing that air defenses are systematically being targeted again around the base of the northern side of the Kerch Bridge.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I don't want to say this too early because maybe I just missed this video before, but there's a new video that just came out that I see right now, just reposted it on our Twitter page. It's allegedly showing a drone flying through Moscow or around the Moscow region. Enforcer, do you recognize this clip right here? I haven't seen it before. It's showing a Ukrainian drone literally flying right through the buildings, like weaving between them. Have you seen this?
I've seen this. Actually, we have it on the map. We're actually going to be covering that a little bit later because it looked like it happened maybe in an archival sense. It looks like it may have been a clip from the Kapotnia attack and it's just finally come out. I couldn't tell because we didn't see any drones of the Ukrainians make it deep into Moscow today. So whatever this is, it's a bit archival, but we do have it in our cycle for coverage tonight. So it's not exactly breaking.
Okay, we'll have to save that one then, but it's wild, certainly, to say the least. That's why I was like, what the hell is this? It literally shows like one of the Ukrainian drones weaving and bobbing through the Moscow area buildings. It's kind of crazy. But right now, though, that is all of our breaking news, so we can jump back to our normal coverage while we wait for more.
And moving back into our normal coverage, which largely brings us right down to the Kerch area, we have been able to see that the Kerch region is still under quite significant attacks. An electronic warfare system was destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine overnight. This was the Russian Volna Kupol-Garant EW system, which was burned down in the occupied Kerch area. Satellite imagery has already captured the strike locations and the completely incinerated units, some of which the occupiers tried to relocate during the following the strikes, but it doesn't appear that that is really a successful operation. These sorts of jamming systems are actually attempting to stop the connections via Starlink that these drones have to possibly jam them and run them into, say, the sea or into an open field somewhere away from the bridge or the critical systems in Kerch. So far, it doesn't really look like the thing's working. I mean, Ukrainian drones have been making it quite literally to the base of the Kerch Bridge several times over the past few days, but the Ukrainians did knock it out just in case if it ever did work. Now the Russians don't have it. We also were able to see that Kerch did come under attack again, and the Russians put out the typical "Geschläge Leitman in die Deutschen Welt," kind of like warning for the bridge. But it did say that the Kerch Peninsula, the ferry, the Crimean Bridge, and other areas were under a drone alert as the drones were coming in. There was also another additional report of the drones over Kerch confirming that they were present and air defenses were seen around the bridge just recently. It sounds like popcorn. Oh. Oh, we saw a tracer up there in the top corner, too.
They're letting loose now. Man, very mysterious. That's the mysterious machine gun fire near the Kerch Bridge. You don't really hear any missiles behind it, though. That's kind of weird. I even saw the Russians today talking on their back channels about how they're kind of surprised there's like such a lack of air defense around the Kerch Bridge, and they're talking about themselves. The Russians are even saying that. So just wild.
I gotta say, it is something else, really, as far as how little air defense there even is around the Kerch Bridge. Honestly, it seems like everywhere in Russia is in this state at this point. No matter how many missile air defenses they have, it all ends up just being machine gun fire at the end of it all, and there's basically no missile-based air defenses to speak of whatsoever anywhere in the country. And in the midst of all this earlier in the day, the Russians were still trying to leave Crimea. There's one person who actually drove in from the bridge driving into Crimea, a stupid idea, actually filmed the line of people who were sitting here waiting to cross the bridge. You see them across that guardrail right here, and it is an endless line of them. We believe from satellite photography that this line is about 7 miles long to try and cross the bridge right now.
That's a lot of damn people trying to get out. Most people are standing outside their cars. They've been waiting there for so long.
Man, that is abysmal, atrocious, even terrible. Honestly, I mean, how in the world can they handle such strain? And if y'all aren't believing me, let me show you all the satellite photography that came out today. This is the beginning of the roadblock, and I'll show you all why it begins down here. This is the checkpoint area where the Russians pull the cars in and inspect them for 3 hours each to make sure that they're safe to cross the bridge, and they're not carrying, say, bombs or anything like that under the car that might blow up the bridge. So they have to inspect them here in this car checkpoint area for about 3 solid hours before they even allow them to leave. So the roadblock begins about right here at the entrance of the car section where they inspect the cars. The truck section hasn't been working since basically the beginning of the war because the Ukrainians loaded up a truck with bombs and then drove it across the bridge and blew it up, which was the first successful attack against the Kerch Bridge. But then the roadblock goes all the way back from this checkpoint all the way back to here. And to show you all that on the map, where that is, it goes all the way back, if I'm not mistaken, to this intersection right here. This is where the line begins at this point for the checkpoint. So I'll draw this out for y'all just to make sure that we're not getting the distance wrong whatsoever. We want this to be dead on the nail correct. Then we cannot sacrifice any accuracy, for many Russian bots will complain if we do. So I'm making sure to even be a little bit liberal with this and kind of make it a little bit shorter. So we get all the way up here to where the cars are at. That is quite literally approximately a 7-mile-long traffic jam of cars, 3 lanes deep, 7 miles long, all of them waiting to get into that checkpoint for the Russians to check the car for 3 hours to get back into Russia. So it's becoming unbearable.
That's ridiculous. And also, not to mention, every single time Ukraine attacks the Kerch area or the Kerch city itself, they have to shut the bridge down for several hours when that attack starts occurring, because the Russians don't know if the Ukrainians are about to hit the Kerch bridge and take it down, so they have to stop all the traffic across it. So that even adds more delays to it. So basically, trying to get across the Crimean bridge is almost like a fool's errand at this point. It's very difficult.
It's near impossible at this point. Even trying to get on a train to leave the area of Crimea, like say you go to the Kerch railway station and try and board a train here from the railway station out, that even appears to be quite difficult because most of the train schedules in Crimea have been completely canceled, and in Kerch, it is quite literally a trickle of trains on the daily schedule that are getting out and leaving the area of Crimea and returning to pick up more people. So it is not looking good in Crimea to speak of right now as far as people trying to get out. And as far as the people who are trying to stay in, it's not really looking that much better for them either. We have been able to see that within the Sevastopol area, food shortages, critical food shortages, are beginning to appear in most stores. I'll show you all this one right here, if I can turn down that audio. We see that the spaghetti noodles are still around, but most everything else seems to be gone. People apparently don't cook a lot of pasta inside of Crimea. We see more shelves that are going flat out bare.
Is this a gremlin shopping for groceries?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I said that. And she showed up on screen. I mean, man, you set me up. Look at me.
Oh, they have some ready-made sandwiches or something right there. What is that, rice? Rice-a-roni?
It's like oats.
Yeah, oats or something.
There's no bread. That literally just says no bread on it. So apparently that was the last bread left.
The hell's going on in this grocery store, bro?
I don't even know, man. I don't even know.
Man, I'll tell you what, these people in the grocery store are wilding.
Man, they're kind of wild and all. But we also were able to hear that apparently, according to 13 Tactical, he also put out a statement today saying, "So friends, without any panic or anything else, everything will be fixed today, but that doesn't mean anything. Stop spinning cotton wool." I don't know what it is with the Russians just saying random shit. Like, this would be like me showing up on the stream and being like, well, if you have 13 watermelons, that's a hat trick. It's like, the hell does this stuff mean? Like, I don't even know what they start off all their posts with. We're going to need to start every post, by the way, folks, as Enforcer Channel policy that we make on Twitter now with a random phrase. So Matthew will be saying, if it's raining in Chicago, there's dogs shitting in Boston or something like that. Like, but beyond that, number one, charge external batteries. Any chargers you have, watches, phones, and anything else that needs to be charged. 2, fill all the containers you have at home with water. Let it be. Number 3, stock up on change. 4, top up your mobile phones for 3 months in advance. Because the SMS package, who the hell needs it, is running out. I don't know how the hell you're supposed to do that. I don't even understand what he's saying. Like,
it's what good is buying a 3-month in advance plan if the cell towers run out of diesel for the generator? It's like having a phone plan is going to be useless at that point. You'll have wasted your money.
Yeah, and also on top of that, it's like if the phones don't have a charge, how in the hell are you supposed to even use anything, But then he said, number 4, don't walk around the city with headphones. Listen to notifications. Honestly, folks, this guy is lost. But number 5, seal the windows well and properly. If you neglect this, you'll be living with plywood. 6.
Damn, bro, you're going to have plywood moving in your house and you don't shut your windows. Like, you better shut your damn windows. That plywood's going to move in and start collecting rent.
Man, you just leave the window open one night, you just hear, oh man, I'm moving in. And it's just like a walking, living plywood. It's like, no. Ah, shit. It's like you're stuck with living with plywood for the next 6 months. 6, a first aid kit and supply of necessary medications, plasters, bandages, etc. Hello to seminar participants. A plaster? Man, this blood has been living in the 9th Ward for too long. Blood going around, giving out dime bags of plaster. But number 7, talk to your family and friends about what you will do, where to go, who to take if something happens, so that you can act in a coordinated manner and without unnecessary hysteria at the right moment. 8, pay attention and meet the needs of your elderly people if they live alone. They say that like elderly people are pets. It's like, take care of your dogs. It's like, take care of your elderly people. Make sure to feed them and water them. Again, without any panic or other acceleration. I gotta say, Russian phrases are a trip. Every time I have to stop and be like, what the hell does that even actually mean? I'm writing all this precisely so that you do not panic in times of danger. We're all just a couple of flights away from our normal lives, where everything works as usual, to the collapse of the city's life support systems. As you can see, and you can't argue with that, this is a real scenario.
Wow, it sounded like a toast. Dude's like, to the city's life support systems collapsing. Here. It's like, what are you doing? Toasting to this fact or something? Also, what does he mean a flight away? Like they mean they're going to get back to mainland Russia from Crimea is what he's saying?
Maybe. I don't even think there were ever flights to Sevastopol. I don't think there's like a commercial airport here for that. I think you had to like drive in or ride the train in or something.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about that. Like just a flight back. It's like, I'm not sure of any flights going there really. So maybe this dude's crazy.
Oh, he's definitely crazy. He's definitely crazy. We don't even have to question that. This guy is off of his rocker. But outside of that, this guy is making it sound that the situation is fairly dire. And from what we're seeing with the food shortages, they're now beginning to appear for certain products where they're just literally disappearing off the shelves and not returning. It certainly does appear to be the case. We also got one last update out of Sevastopol that more than 100 streets in Sevastopol and several settlements adjacent to the city remain without power after the attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces. More than 100 streets in the city remained without power. according to apparently it's Sebastopol Energy, which reported the situation. So it looks like things are still going quite badly, and they're only getting worse within most of Crimea. And explosions, by the way, as a side note, were also reported around the area of Krasnoperekomsk, although we don't have any video and picture evidence to geolocate where that was, what kind of damage it inflicted, and what kind of results those strikes will bring. But it does appear that the Crimean situation is still only getting worse, and a lot of people right now are talking about this situation. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so now that we're seeing some videos and some anecdotal reports that the food shortages are erupting across Crimean territory, and now the grocery shelves are appearing to be largely empty, except for a few little pieces of scraps here and there, like pasta bags and stuff like that. What are your thoughts? 69% said Russia will begin to starve in Crimea. 17% said Ukraine will allow some food to arrive to save the civilians, and 8% said Russia will get food to them very soon. So I think Ukraine has made it clear at this point. Their goal is to make Crimea an island in every way possible. That means run the electricity out, run the food out, run out the ammo for the forces. Every Russian inside of Crimea is going to be forced to leave. And if they don't leave and the Russian forces stay, then they'll be in for some very bad suffering at that point. So they've made it clear that's what the goal is. So all Russia can do at this point is basically start negotiating an exit for their forces out of Crimea, or they're going to be basically left to starve down there for the most part. So I don't think this is going to be solved anytime soon because, ask yourself the question, how are they going to solve it? They can't get any trucks into there to get food in. They can't get any supplies in whatsoever because the logistics are getting destroyed all over the place. So, what's the solution? It's basically to leave at this point. It's literally a critical situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that's a very critical situation. I'll be with 69%. The Russians are probably going to be in a bad spot here very soon in Crimea, and they're probably going to start starving if they find no way to get them out. I have a feeling, to be honest with y'all folks, the Russian government doesn't really care about the well-being of the Russian people, but if they let thousands or hundreds of thousands of them starve inside of Crimea, that's not going to bode well for the Russian government. Far less, it's going to bode them far worse than it ever would Ukraine with what's being inflicted inside of Crimea. So the Russian government is going to have to try and find some way to evacuate these people. Otherwise, most of them are just going to end up starving to death in there because there's really no way for them to get out right now. So that's probably what we'll end up seeing is a Russian evacuation of Crimea, to where everyone who is not essential may be removed and relocated, either forcibly or otherwise, into the Russian Federation's mainland and spread out across the entirety of the country, wherever they can find them room or someone that will take them. So that might be what we're seeing here in the near future, and that will also be quite extensive in terms of the consumption of resources that will take for the Russians to be able to conduct in the midst of the already dire supply situation that they're seeing nationwide. But moving us on out of that news that we were able to hear of in Crimea today, which certainly is not looking good at all, we've also been able to hear that within the Russian Federation itself, things don't really appear to be going all too well. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure that we cover one other thing about Belarus today that came from the statement or the state of the peninsula that we read off from Zelensky just a moment ago. When we get to the end here, we were able to see that Zelensky did talk about the measures that Belarus is taking to build up infrastructure inside of southern Belarus and to be able to try and help the Russian Federation prepare for a possible offensive from their territory. We were able to see a picture of Zelensky in the presidential palace, or largely the office of the president of Ukraine, looking over the photographs and intelligence that had been given to him. And in a very rare moment, we were able to see that they actually showed the public what they're getting. They're getting satellite photography of these.
And what's this showing?
It's showing supply depots that they're building, new storage tanks for fuel, new ammunition dumps. This one right here, it actually says it's the 1405th Artillery Unit or Arsenal within the area of Velika Gorova, which, let's see here, Velika Gorova. I believe that's somewhere inside of the Gomel Oblast, if I'm not mistaken, of Belarus. And this one was also near to Krasny Viver, or let's see, Verig or something. Yeah, it's Verig, actually. Krasny Verig is where this one is. And this is actually in the Gomel Oblast. And this one's in the Mogilskaya Oblast, which would be, let's see, where would that one be? I think this is actually the one with Minsk in it. So it'd be somewhere down here in the southern side of it.
Well, at this point, Zelensky's got satellite evidence showing they're building up not just forces, but actual bases along the border. That's irrefutable at that point. Before, oh, wow, here's some more as well right here, apparently. They're doing a lot of stuff, actually. What are these showing?
So actually going through them, we can see that they're saying that there are 6 automobile mostiv. I don't know what mostiv means as far as a word, unfortunately, so if anyone can translate that into English in the live chat, I'd be very appreciative. We also have the Basi Abveri Gani something else. I don't know what that one says. I don't really know what many of these others say, except for the one that says automobili mostiv, which means something pertaining to cars. And we can see that this one is actually located on one of the highways leading towards Sari, which is somewhat of a bigger town somewhere within this area, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here.
Give me back to that picture real quick. Let me get a translate on that real quick. Let me get an image of it. Let's see here. All right, now you can go ahead. I'll get the translation.
All right, but we are seeing, though, that in this publication, there is a lot of proof, a significant amount of proof for that matter, that the Belarusians are building up significant amounts of additional infrastructure all the way from Gomel to Brest along the Ukrainian border area. And that is, of course, somewhat concerning because it is showing us that a lot of this is near to the border. And actually, to readjust the map, we're actually not looking this far north. We're actually right on the border down here in most of these instances. Like, for example, this is the town of Ivanove right here, which is apparently right along the border. And if we look along the border, we can find the town of Ivanove somewhere. I'm trying to see if I can find it, folks. Here it is, Ivanova, right here. And we actually see that one of these infrastructure improvements is just south of that on the roadway near to this bridge right here on the P144.
Yeah. So it looks like what they're saying here in this article or this graphic that we're looking at. I got it translated, by the way, so we can tell what it's saying. They're saying that Belarus is building toward Ukraine, like we just went over, and these pictures here are all showing brand new bridges that are bringing the Belarusians closer to the Ukrainian border. And what Ukraine's alleging is all these will be used to transport military equipment down toward the border to potentially launch an invasion of Ukraine. And the translation of the text up there at the top, it says they're building automobile bridges, transport interchanges, ammunition storage base fuel stations, and also ammunition storage bases. So it appears to be, I honestly, it looks very compelling, I'll say. It looks like they're building the transportation solutions to get the forces to these new ammunition bases that are being built on the border. And we saw that satellite image of them building one of those bases just a moment ago in the last image that we got. So really, I mean, we really can't even dispute this much. There's literally picture and, satellite information showing that they're building it. So I wonder what they're up to. Are they actually planning on invading Ukraine? Because, I mean, why else would they build that?
And also we can see here in this infographic, if you can do a translation on this one as well, it looks like this one at the top is saying something along the lines of the Belarusians are modernizing transportation infrastructure. And we can see that they're pointing out specific points of interest a little bit farther into Belarus, more north towards the Minsk and other major cities within the central area of Belarus, but south of them still, apparently showing other infrastructure improvements that have been made to apparently, I would assume, some sort of military posts or military bases, which also look to be possibly built up as well, or the infrastructure around them is being improved. So it looks like the Ukrainians have actually shown receipts on all of this.
Yeah, so it looks like all those red dots you're seeing right there on the map, some of those are artillery supplies depots, some of them are ammunition production plants. Apparently the one on the far left is a production plant that they're alleging is there. Also a bunch of fuel stations and supply depots scattered around the area. And they're also stating down here at the bottom that apparently Belarus is also constructing a training and combat center as well in the mix of that. So a lot of military infrastructure. I mean, arguably, if you didn't know what was being built here, you could technically argue that Belarus is simply improving their civilian infrastructure, but combining the new bridges they're building and the new highways with these ammunition storage sites, production sites, and training centers, I mean, it's clearly with a military purpose behind it once you add those details to it.
Well, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me, though, about it, and this would also be hard for the Belarusians to explain, all of their infrastructure improvements are miles from the Ukrainian border along the southern highway that they have here, the M10. Everything around the M10 south of it, on all the roadways leading to the Ukrainian border, those are the ones that are receiving spot improvements. And we might be seeing that there are other improvements that the Ukrainians are making, well, the Belarusians are making to their bridge infrastructure throughout the rest of Belarus. But these are the ones that are being pointed out that are all happening at the same time right now in the present day. And it does pose a very very clear picture from the evidence that's being shown by the Ukrainians that the Belarusians are trying to build up some sort of an infrastructure base for the Russians to launch a more successful invasion of Ukraine from the north than they did the last time, or at least to attempt to try and do something like that. It's something quite interesting, I'd have to say. On the other hand, however, Lukashenko has stated today, and I'll show you all the statement here that he made, and I believe, Mandy, that we can show this one, because it looks like it's from a Belarusian news source, from what I can tell.
As long as you add commentary to it, we should be safe.
All right, and so we're going to read off the subtitles for y'all and let y'all hear exactly what Lukashenko had to say today about what's going on and what his position is. And once again, this isn't, pure on fact. What he says could be a lie, but this is what Lukashenko was saying at the moment right now. Let's see here. Soon the subtitles should be... Wait, are there no... one of these I saw had subtitles in it. Apparently not this one, though. Apparently it's not the one that I picked. It's apparently another one. But to summarize here really quickly, Lukashenko told the visiting Russian officials that President Zelensky's envoys had recently visited him in Minsk, sitting at the same desk, and then he had told the Ukrainians that Belarus wants peace and only peace. And so it appears that at some point recently, a Ukrainian delegation actually went to Belarus and probably explained to the Belarusians that they were seriously considering war unless the Belarusians stopped any and all of their actions that looked like they were preparing to help the Russians conduct an offensive into Ukraine. And according to Lukashenko right now, he's saying that they want peace. And we have heard that according to the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, they turned off the repeaters, but they hadn't removed them yet. That's an important note that we do have to make. But we're still seeing that Ukraine is pointing out all of the other actions that Belarus is taking, and now quite literally putting all of the proof into the real world as to why they're concerned. The building of fuel depots, ammunition and artillery storage sites, munitions plants, bridge infrastructure improvements, highway infrastructure improvements, overpasses, interchanges, and the whole nine yards to be able to try and make the movement of forces and supplies as efficient as it can be along the border areas with northern Ukraine. And so we will have to keep watching this situation and watch its developments in the near future, because it is quite an interesting and a very concerning one now that we've been presented the full-on evidence and receipts by the Ukrainians that's showing that they're not just making up this possible imminent threat on their northern border. They're actually watching the Belarusians build up the infrastructure base for that in real time, and it apparently have been for months.
Yeah, and all the people out there, it's like, Belarus would never let Russia invade from their territory into Ukraine. I mean, that's a little bit absurd to say that, because, back in 2022 when the war started, the Russians literally invaded from the north into Ukraine from Belarusian territory when the war started. They used it as a primary staging ground when they launched that invasion. So, it's not unheard of. Like, the people out there, the analysts are saying it's absurd to even suggest that Belarus would get involved. It's like, well, do they not remember what happened in 2022? It's like they literally invaded from there. So I wouldn't put it past them. Belarus has always said, we want peace, we want this and that and another, and then they let Russia do whatever they want in their territory after they say that. So Lukashenko's words are meaningless. Like, whatever the hell he said in that video is irrelevant, really. He'll do what he's told.
Yeah, he will do what he's told for the larger part, and it does look like all of this proof today. I would say, folks, that I actually would believe the Russians really are trying to prepare for an offensive inside of northern Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are trying to find some way to preempt that, stymie it, or stop it by threatening the Belarusians beforehand, or even conducting offensive actions against Belarus preemptively to leave the Russians in a lurch to where they weren't ready to conduct an offensive, and now instead they'd be conducting a defense on Belarusian territory. But moving us on out of that, it's now time for us to get on into the news that we have from inside of Russia today. Also Western Europe, the Middle East, and also the United States, and the front lines in Ukraine, which we haven't gotten to yet. But I do have to say, folks, humongous thanks to everybody who has been watching this channel so far tonight. We have had a peak viewership tonight of a whopping 16.3 thousand people, and 63,000 people have watched the stream in the first hour and 10 minutes. And I gotta say that we're always entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that we're able to cover the news to so many people each and every single night, and I hope that, as usual, our news coverage has been hopefully top-notch once again. But before we move on into the rest of our news for the night, I do want to take a brief moment to get to answer 3 questions in the chat and get to talk to a few of y'all before we move on into the rest of the news. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's get our first 3 super chatters of the night. And our first one here is a very generous $100 support from none other than Stephen Hodgson. And thank you very much, Stephen, for that largest super chat of the night so far. And we do appreciate that. And I believe it said that was his first super chat on the stream. I think it is. And a huge shout out to you, Stephen, for choosing to support the channel, because it's you, the viewers, that make this all possible. And Stephen said, Ukrainian sanctions are super effective and LSA.
And I got to thank you for the unbelievably massive support, and I would absolutely agree with you. Ukrainian sanctions are proven to be wildly effective across the board in most places. We're seeing that Ukrainian drone attacks are conducting damage against the Russian Federation that sanctions couldn't even hope to attempt in some cases. Sanctions were able to bar the sale of Russian oil internationally, but then the Russians just circumvented that by creating the Shadow Fleet and getting the oil out through the Shadow Fleet instead. The Ukrainians said the Russians aren't getting a drop of oil out, and they blew up the ports that the Russians were using to export the stuff. So I would definitely agree with you. Ukrainian sanctions are working quite effectively. I would say better than any other sanctions we've seen so far. Even the legitimate ones have not been able to work this well. And I would hope to see that the Ukrainian drone campaigns continue to grow in their size and also the amount of damage that they're able to inflict, because the more damage that they inflict, the deeper in Russia that they can, and the more consistent that it is, the worse off the Russian position becomes, and the sooner, hopefully, the war will start to come to a close and finally resolve, hopefully with a Western, American, and Ukrainian success at the end of it all, considering that would be the primary objective that we're trying to see right now in the war. Ukraine's trying to see the restoration of their 1991 borders in a perfect world. The United States, and generally most of the Western world, is wanting to see that the Russians are ground down and that the Ukrainians are able to succeed in the war in some extent and join NATO and the European Union afterwards for trade and defense reasons. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again for that support, Stephen Hodgson, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we actually have breaking news right now. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so something is on fire in the Moscow region right now. I'm getting 2 pictures from Brenpunkt Ukraine on Twitter, by the way. A very good Twitter page, by the way. Give them a follow. But right here you can see, though, that something is burning. So this does confirm that drones were sent into the Moscow region. Now, sadly, though, we don't have a geolocation on this. But the big significant part that we can take out of these photos is drones definitely went into the Moscow region. They were hitting targets in the area. So it's very possible that we could see footage coming out and maybe showing some sort of strike, maybe in the outer perimeter of the Moscow city itself, but right now that's unclear. But Enforcer, what do you make of this?
I would have to say that it is quite an interesting note. That's white fire right there. That's some sort of ammunition that's cooking and burning over there over the distance. So it looks like whatever hit might be an air defense system in Moscow, but we're not entirely sure, because the next picture that we see here also shows that there's a wisp of black smoke, which looks to be different than this one. So it might be 2 individual targets that have been hit in different areas of different types. But it is very interesting to note that there are hits landing in Moscow right now, which were... Go ahead.
Oh, wait, I don't mean to interrupt you, by the way. I was going to let you finish. I was just letting you know I had to butt something in here. But we also just got a video as well, that apparently from the Moscow region. It looks like there's a video from an apartment building showing a fire out there in the distance. It might be the same one, right as it was turning dawn.
Now let's take a look.
Ебать. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой.
That's it. Like, he doesn't really look at it a lot during the clip, but there's definitely smoke rising from over there. That doesn't really line up with the other smoke plumes that we're seeing. This one actually looks to be black, and it's quite large. And the other black smoke that we saw was like in a wisp almost, and then the other thick column of smoke we had was white. So this looks like it might even be a third hit or a third impact site somewhere in Moscow, possibly.
Yeah, maybe so. We'll have to keep an eye on it and see exactly what was hit. Sadly, right now we just can't geolocate it. We probably could if we had if we were able to sit down and study it for a while, but sadly on stream we can't geolocate it just from the pictures that we have. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, and I'll let you know if I get more breaking news about it.
And we will definitely, hopefully, be getting more breaking news about that here as soon as the sun continues to rise. But with that, a humongous thanks once again to Steve Hodgson for that unbelievable and incredible support. And we thank you for the massive support. Folks like you who go over your way to help this channel to keep it running, make the thing possible, not only for us to run as our job, but for everyone to be able to watch the show daily. We're greatly appreciative of that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rick Galenchin, our viewer all the way from Canada. And a huge shout to you, Rick, for that $50 support right there. He threw that in Canadian monies, by the way, that juicy Canadian dollars. And Rick, he put in a super sticker of the YouTube creature jumping out the treasure chest and punching the air right there. That could be the Ayatollah these days. You never can tell. But thank you very much, Rick, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you incredibly for that support and helping this channel to keep on running, Rick Galenchin, because you have helped this channel to keep on running for a long time, all the way from our neighbor in the north, the Canadians. We love the Canadians, I tell you. There's many of viewers here on this channel that are Canadians. As a matter of fact, folks, to give you all a little bit of a breakdown here, let me see if I can do this here really quickly. I want to find that geography. Right now at this moment, Canada makes up the second largest percentage of viewers here on this channel, making up 8% of our viewer base over the past 28 days. Actually, our statistics have changed quite a lot as of late. Back in the day, it used to be, I think the United States made up like 52%, and the rest of the world made up the other remaining 48%. Nowadays, American viewers make up 68.2% of our audience, which means that 2 out of every 3 audience viewers right now are Americans. Canadians make up 8%, the British make up 5.5%, Australia makes up 3.5%, and Germany makes up 1.2%. So very interesting there. Actually, our statistics have changed quite a lot over the years. You know what? Let me look at this over the lifetime of the channel, because I feel like this is a fairly recent occurrence. Yeah, it actually does reflect that quite well in our statistics, because historically, the U.S. viewership over the whole channel average, everything combined, only makes up 58.2% of our viewership. So interesting enough, recently we've been gathering up a lot more American viewers on the show, and they're starting to eke out the margins against most of our international viewers, which those audiences appear to have remained the same size over the years. It's just the American contingent has grown a lot larger. But I do have to say that the Canadian viewers are a welcome friend here on this channel. We love to know that many a Canadian watch this channel and enjoy it for their news as well as ours around the world every single day. And we got to thank you massively, Rick, for being one of those Canadian viewers and enjoying the channel enough to go out of your way to support it and make it possible for the channel to keep running, not only for us to keep the lights on and pay our bills, but for everyone to have a show to watch. And so humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on to the rest of the news that we have from around the world.
All right, so the final super chat of the segment goes to Mr. Lance Link. And thank you very much, Mr. Lance, for that $50 support as well. Also very generous of you. And I believe that is your first ever super chat on any channel on the entirety of YouTube, if I read that properly earlier. But a huge shout out to you, good sir, for choosing our channel to support the first time ever. And we do appreciate that a ton, by the way. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you massively, Mr. Lance Link, for your first super chat to the channel ever. Throwing in that hippo, flinging around that coin, and also enjoying the channel enough to support it. As we say to everybody, your support is greatly appreciated, and it helps us to make this entire operation possible. Not only that, it helps us to keep these live streams ad-free and sponsor-free, and it helps us to be able to say what we say every single day on air. And we are greatly appreciative of folks like you and everybody else who goes out of their way to spend their time on this channel every day, usually hours a day, and to also support the channel in super chats, going out of their way above and beyond to do something that nobody's expected to do to help this channel to keep on running for the vast multitudes and millions of people who watch this channel yearly. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night. And we have quite some news coming out of Russia. Inside of Russia today, we were able to see that the fuel lines are growing in Kaluga.
Ну это просто, ну, типа, в надежде
In the middle of the night.
Поехать с Цимлянской очередь и комментатор...
Stop all that yapping.
Вы, типа,
Oh my god! Like, basically that's the translation.
You know what? I got a tip for the Russians. If you would go home at night and go to sleep and not drive around and spend fuel, you would probably not run out of fuel as fast.
It looks like a lot of these cars are off. Like they've been turned off and they're just sitting there.
I think they actually might be sleeping in their cars, actually, if I'm being straight up. I think they're like sleeping in the cars. You know how people like used to wait outside like Best Buy and like for the iPhone releases and stuff, they'd set up like a tent outside and wait for it. That's basically what the gas has turned into. It's like a lottery system.
Man, they're waiting for that Petrol Theft Auto 6 release.
Yeah, they're waiting for a lot, and I don't think the hopes and dreams are ever going to crack up for them.
Man, they driving around in their little car looking at this line. Man, and when you start running low on fuel, you just got to get in that line and just sit there for days, I guess, waiting to get fuel.
Yeah, I think so. It's just wild. Between all the refineries getting shut down, the lack of transport, and also the diesel price going through the roof for fuel transportation. I mean, these people's outlook is not very good for automobili.
Man, it's like the bread lines of the Great Depression here. And it just keeps going. On and on and on.
I did see that in Russia, the search results for different terms came out yesterday, and apparently how to siphon gas was one of the most searched things inside of Russia, apparently. So you can sort of make what you want out of that. That could mean that maybe they're trying to siphon gas from like an old vehicle they have sitting around to their newer vehicle that they're using, or it could mean that they're turning into thieves because they're getting desperate. It depends on who you ask.
Also, I heard that the next biggest search term and the biggest craze that's going to be happening in Russia is how to strip copper wiring. I heard that that's also going to be a very big one that's coming next to raise the money for the gas, considering that the gas costs an arm and a leg and a kidney now inside of Russia.
Yeah, it's just really tough, by the way. Also, I like this little like mock-up rim that they have sitting up here on the dashboard, by the way. Kind of unique. They'll probably need that.
Man, they're going to need that for their tiny car, for their tiny chores. Man, they're going to hop in that thing, man, to like be like a monster basically on a Hot Wheels car.
But that is a long line, though. How long is this video, though?
Oh, it's not much longer. It's only 10 more seconds. There's the gas station finally, by the way. We finally made it. And now, of course, there's the shot of Bill Wilderman. They have to include it. We also were able to see that within the area just south of Moscow, we were able to get footage of Moscow and Tula under attack today. Let's take a little gander. Oh, there was a hit. And some air defense fire. Oh, wow. Proxy fusing and all. That's a big air defense gun, actually. It's probably like a Gush gun. Oh, you can hear it. Yeah, that is definitely a Gush gun. But that's the end of that clip. That either came out of the Moscow or the Tula area. We also got this one of a drone. What? But that's not a close-up of a drone. We want a close-up of a drone. Yes,
oh, this is the video. This
Yeah.
is the one right here out of the Moscow region.
Look at that. Perfection. This guy has the hand of Steven Spielberg filming a movie here. Look at the stability of the clip. Perfection.
That's remarkably close.
Fly, my baby Bliet. I think this is from the Kaponia attack. It's definitely not from today. It looks to be archival. But really cool to see up close footage like that. Oh yeah, that's definitely from the Kaponia attack.
Yeah, those variants of the Ukrainian drones really don't move very fast. Those are pretty slow.
It's those Molinas that are really quick. Oh, here comes another one. Oh, looks like an air show. Oh, you hear the tank going up. Do you hear that? That was that giant tank blowing up.
Oh my gosh.
Man, oh my, listen to it. Yeah, there it is.
It's a damn travesty. Oh, the huge manatee.
The huge manatee.
Well, at this point, the Russian civilians with their phone cameras are more effective than the Russian air defense.
Man, at least they can track the target. Man, but moving us on out of that clip, we also were able to see that further on, deep inside of the country, bad news came out today from Nizhny Novgorod, believe. The Nizhny Novgorod refinery, which is the fourth largest in Russia and the second largest in gasoline production, has suspended operations after an attack by Ukrainian drones. So, not only is the Kaponia refinery absolutely out, but also the gasoline production at Nizhny Novgorod is also out as well. An absolute travesty, to say the least. We also were able to see that in Penza, mobilization is now beginning right out of the factory. Now you can clock out of work and clock right into the Russian army.
Вон едут,
What the hell is going on?
They're mobilizing, Matthew. They're taking the men from the factory and putting them in the army.
Man, it looks like they're about to jump somebody. That's how they mobilize people. This dude's about to get jumped whoever's standing over there in the corner.
Man, they call it jumping them in, which in America means you get your ass beat. But in Russia, that means you're just going into the army. That's all. I don't really understand what's going on here either. What's going on? Someone said.
Is that the bloke?
I guess.
Sit and go. I don't even both.
Люди с работы выходят, их забирают.
People leave work and they're taken away, is what the lady said.
Damn.
So apparently that's the conscription officer?
Oh, man, this is heated. I don't know who the hell is who in this picture right here. Everybody's acting crazy, but damn, that dude was squaring up with somebody. He's like, what the hell are you looking at? It's like, damn, they're out here about to start getting in fisticuffs out here.
Man, you know what's even crazier is that this guy's not dressed up in like any official uniform. He's just dressed up in all black.
That kind of stands out, though. You can tell something's up with him. I couldn't tell if he was a suspect or the aggressor. I couldn't tell who he was.
I don't know, but... Oh, they call him a jackal.
Damn. I'd set him off, too.
And there's a cop over here.
Давай, Вов. Нет, он за это. Вов!
Damn.
Вов, ты туда? Возьмешь нас?
Man,
Пошли, я
apparently, don't
нашел.
call the Russians a jackal. Apparently, that sets them off. Like that word jackal set that dude off crazy. He was allowed to throw hands over that.
Bro, that guy said, you jackal, you went, man, I beat your ass, man. Like, he finally, like, broke out. That's like, dude, I mean, I never knew that was, like, a great offense in Russia, but apparently, folks, we know jackal's apparently a fighting word in Russia now. We also were able to see in Saratov, the gas lines are also forming here. They had absolutely vile music. I mean, it's raw.
Oh, man,
like,
that nasty bass and that whole lot of shaking the windows.
Oh, it looked like there was a fight about to happen right here. Look at this. There's some people like frantically throwing around their hands in an argument right there. Look. Man, bro, they're about to get it's my gas, damn it. Like,
man, the tensions are running loose inside of Russia. Everybody's ready to fight.
Well, you see
this is what happens, folks, when you take away the luxuries from people. They revert back to our normal stage, which is pure aggression. You take away their nice little trinkets and amenities, and for the Russians, you take away their basic necessities. That's all it takes for them, and it's right back to the Stone Age.
It's not looking too good. It's not looking peachy either. I'll tell you that. Like, definitely not looking peachy. We also were able to see down in the area of Yoshkar Ola, for some side note, that there was an RS-24 Yars ICBM launcher that was just driving through the city overnight. They believe it might be for a future ICBM test, but we don't really know. They're always on the move. It's a part of their nuclear doctrine, so it might be nothing. We also were able to see that within the Ufa area, 2 oil refineries were hit today. The Bashneft Novoil and the Bashneft Team refineries, which I have a very hard time pronouncing, but there is the fire on one of them. Right there. We also were able to not see the second one, but we did get reports that 2 refineries were hit within the Bashkortostan Oblast today. Moving us on over and into Irkutsk, we also were able to see the fuel lines within this area, which is a duplicate. So this is actually from Irkutsk. So let me take this one and delete it, because that is the legitimate one from Irkutsk. But moving us on out of the Russian Federation, it's now time for us, folks, to make our way on into the Western European news. Today we were able to hear the NATO Secretary General who I do have to say, folks, call the blood Krispy Kreme. He can glaze like no other. But he said that tens of billions of dollars in new defense contracts will be announced during the July summit. So it does appear that some significant sorts of defense contracts are about to be signed here within the very near future. We've also been able to see that within Sicily, near to the coast of Sicily, the French did take a Russian-linked shadow tanker today. Oh, the French are now adding music to their clips as well.
What the hell? They're adding in like pop beats too. That's kind of a little bit. That's very French, actually, if you think about it.
Man, it's too French, honestly. You know, they ought to have a Daft Punk, man. Harder, faster, stronger. You know, like that whole deal. Man, isn't that like the song how it went? Something like that.
I guess. I thought that was a Kanye West song right there, but maybe.
No. Kanye's songs, they're not repeatable. Like, definitely not.
Man, honestly, I'm going to be straight up honest. When you first did that, I didn't think you were imitating a singer, but I thought you were imitating Stephen Hawking or something.
Oh, yo,
harder. I was like, what is he talking about? What is this going into right now?
Russian vessel, oh, yo, harder, faster, stronger. But anyways, here's the French boarding the ship. Oh, look at it. You see, you can tell they're legitimately clearing the vessel in this clip, unlike the Royal Marine Commandos, because it's a helmet cam and they're doing it in real time. And this comes off a lot better, I'd say, just for like the optics of it, than what the Royal Marine Commandos little film crew did. Look at them go. Also, nice
between the French and the British taking these Russian tankers, and now the British are trying to sell their oil off the tanker that they seized. They're going a step further this time. Russia's getting ganged up on by Europe right now, definitely.
Man, really, they are. You know what's even funnier, man, is that the British are out there trying to sell that oil. I don't even know how they're going to sell it. It's like, fresh oil, get it off the block. It's like, I don't know how they're going to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they're going to like pawn it or something. They're going to go down to the pawn store and be like, hey, we got like a whole ship of oil out here. You want to buy it? We just like stole it off the Russians. Y'all want some?
Would you like some? Would you like some more? Oh man,
they haven't done something like that ever since the King's Mandate back in the day when they're going through like freaking like the Nile River and stuff like that. They hadn't done anything crazy like that in a while.
The British just said, "All right, fellas, we're bringing back privateering. You can just take a Russian ship and sell whatever the hell's on it for money." It's like, bro, that's crazy. I mean, like, you never heard of that. It's like since like hell. The mid to late 1700s, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like the last time they did privateering, which is kind of wild. But anyways, the French did seize another one of the ships today near to Sicily. And it does appear that the French and the British are now getting pretty concerted in their efforts to board and seize any shadow tanker that's within reach, which basically means anywhere that's heading out of Western Russia further on into the greater world. So, Russian shadow tanker fleet might start to decrease in size here in the very near future. And a lot of people are talking, speaking of oil, about the Russian refineries like the fourth largest one in Russia at Nizhny Novgorod shutting on down. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so we just heard yesterday, we reported this on last night's stream, that the Moscow refinery is going to be shut down basically until next year. So that's horrible because the Moscow refinery is one of the biggest ones in the entire region and was responsible for Moscow's fuel supply. So that's something there that's huge in itself. But now we're hearing today that allegedly the Nizhny Novgorod refinery, which is another refinery nearby, is also being suspended as well. So what are your thoughts about that? In the backdrop of the major fuel crisis, how's this going to affect things? And it looks like 72% said the oil refining is now the choke point for the Russian fuel losses, while 20% said the fuel transport is the choke point, and 2% said it seems like something else is causing the issue. And really, it depends on which place we're talking about. Because if we're talking about around Moscow, the refining is the issue. If we're talking about these other mainland Russian cities, the refining getting taken out by these Ukrainian attacks, that is the reason they're having a fuel shortage. But if we're talking about Crimea, that's a little bit different. That's more about transporting the fuel there than it is about refining the fuel. So it's a bit of a mix of both, depending on which area of Russia we're talking about. But the end result is fuel for nobody and fuel for maybe the Russian military, but everybody else gets screwed in the meantime. So I'm with the 6%, kind of a little bit undecided. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I'm with the 72%. I would say that the oil refining is really the checkpoint, because while in some areas like Crimea, it's just simply trying to even get the fuel there at all, which is the problem. By and large, basically the whole of the Russian Federation itself is seeing that it's running out of fuel, or at least more than 80% of the oblasts are affected now by a lack of fuel, because there's just not enough refining capabilities to keep up with the demand. And so I would say that I'm with the 72%. Refining really is the largest bottleneck that they're seeing right now, and it really is trumping anything else inside of the country at this point, as far as how much damage it's inflicting nationwide in Russia. The fact that the Russians are still consuming so much fuel, and yet there's so little to go around that they're refining each and every day. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And in case you all haven't heard, folks, we're now going to be talking about that situation in Venezuela. As many of y'all will know, the earthquake that hit Venezuela yesterday has been one of the worst that we've seen in recent times. A 7.5 magnitude earthquake hit within central Venezuela, near to the city of, I believe it's San Felipe, if I'm not mistaken, just a couple of miles to the east, and has largely devastated the entirety of northern central Venezuela. Cities like Barquisimeto, Valencia, and Caracas have been affected by the earthquake, and we're now hearing that thousands of people, I believe it's over 10,000, are missing, and several hundred have been confirmed dead at this point from the earthquake. The pictures that have come out have been absolutely terrible. Large buildings have collapsed in entirely on themselves. We're assuming most of them were occupied at the time of the earthquake. Entire cities look to have been decimated or destroyed by the earthquake. Pretty tough stuff that's going on down there. We also were able to see satellite photography showing that it appears that there's now some sort of an oil spill that's happening in the meantime. To show you all where this is along the Venezuelan coast, it's somewhere around this oil facility right here. And it looks like this refinery of some sort has ended up rupturing a tank from the earthquake, and it's now causing an oil spill within the area, as we can see the slick of oil heading out into the Caribbean off of the coastline near to that refinery area, which is also showing that a refinery may have been knocked out of action as well, and is yet to be assessed knocked out of action from the earthquake that we've seen. We have also been able to see that as well. Southcom is now stating that they are mobilizing an operational planning team to coordinate a whole-of-government relief effort for Venezuela following devastating twin earthquakes. The command is deploying specialized airlift, logistics, search and rescue assets to reach heavily damaged areas and restore critical infrastructure throughout the entirety of Venezuela. It's a very interesting sort of a situation that we're seeing right now. The U.S. is going to be actively involved in helping, but there are thousands of people who are missing right now in Venezuela. We don't know how many of those have been buried beneath the rubble and have died, and how many of them just turned out to be missing and they're still alive and they'll be able to be recovered alive. We're not entirely sure what the statistics or numbers on that is finally going to sparse out to be, but it does appear to be quite a major crisis, and the Venezuelan government has welcomed the help of the United States of America in trying to find and recover those missing and dead at this point from the earthquake. In the midst of this all, we've also been able to hear out of Washington, D.C. today that the United States has now changed its position, and according to the French President Emmanuel Macron, as far as the situation in Ukraine is concerned, regarding the Ukraine, the United States approved for the first time a text stating that it is no longer a neutral mediator, but rather supports Ukraine's territorial integrity, provides military assistance, helps with the energy sector, and imposes sanctions on Russia. So it does appear that by this written statement today, this is the first time the United States has changed in written form its statement, position, and policies about the war in Ukraine and the U.S.'s position and stance towards the state of Ukraine, which is a very interesting sort of a move. We don't really know, though, folks, how long this is going to hold out. As many of y'all know, the President of the United States could wake up tomorrow and we could be at war with Ukraine. You know, anything like that could happen. So we don't really know if this is going to become permanent or whether this is just a move in the here and the now. I'm assuming that it's a move within the here and the now. Putin will probably call up the president here soon, tell him that he loves him, lovey-dovey, and then the president will be back to blaming Zelensky and Ukraine for the whole war and life and everything else in general. So unless if this stays long term, we start to see an actual meaningful shift in the in the U.S.'s position towards Ukraine and actions and not just words, I'm going to be assuming that the foreign policy position by the United States is still going to be fairly unfriendly to Ukraine or even antagonistic for the larger part. But moving us on out of the U.S.'s position on Ukraine, which we've been able to hear about in that statement today, we also have more news to talk about coming out from the front lines of Ukraine today, which has had some very interesting developments of its own right fight to speak of. Before we get into those front lines, though, a lot has also happened in the Ukrainian rear lines today, unfortunately, from Russian strikes, which we were able to confirm. We were able to see that around the Kremenchuk area, a refinery was hit and was caught on fire today by Russian drone attacks, showing that the Ukrainians have lost a refinery of their own, although we do believe that the Ukrainians can supplant refined fuel production from nearby NATO states, much like the Russians. It would be fairly expensive. Ukrainian supply lines are shorter, so transportation costs wouldn't be that great, but generally buying refined fuels and having them imported from abroad is always going to be fairly expensive, meaning that the Russians now appear to be trying to continue their damage against Ukrainian refineries and fuel infrastructure to make the Ukrainian wartime situation as expensive or as difficult to fight as the Russians are, which I don't believe will be happening anytime soon, but the Russians are beginning down that path and trying to see it come to fruition at some point here in the near future. We've also been able to hear out of Ukraine today in the capital of Kyiv that Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, has stated that to repel a possible offensive from Belarus, Ukraine would need to form new brigades. And we could save on forming brigades today and pay with territory tomorrow, according to the commander-in-chief Syrsky. We've also been able to hear that Zelensky stated that they're going to be approving a 40-day operation by the security service aimed at influencing the aggressor state to compel it to bring the war to an end. And actually, I just saw that Matthew did bring up that we forgot the Iran news, which we do have to cover. So we will be making sure to move on to that here in a second, but still it is showing us that right now inside of the capital of Ukraine in Kyiv, that the Ukrainian armed forces will be apparently conducting a concerted drone campaign against Russia for the next 40 days, and we're also going to be seeing that Oleksandr Syrsky is going to be forming brigades as well, raising new brigades out of the Ukrainian armed forces to possibly move them towards the northern border and to be able to prepare for defenses against the Russian Federation's possible offensives from the territory of Belarus. But moving us on into the Middle East really quickly to make sure that we cover all of this news, we have been able to see that the Israeli Air Force today, to make sure to open this up in a bit of a more meaningful way to explain what's going on with Iran, is continuing its strikes against the Hezbollah forces inside of southern Lebanon. Israeli strikes were confirmed in the area of Beit Yaun within southern Lebanon, which we can see the pictures of right here, is showing the impacts and explosions around the area of Israeli Air Force airstrikes, and video footage has confirmed that the Israeli Air Force is still heavily active in the skies over the course of the day, which we can see in this clip. These are the flares being fired from the Israeli aircraft, which are operating over Lebanon. What the hell? Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Really, sound like straight up demons on the ground down here. It's like what the interesting commentary.
Hell, it's something else. We also were able to hear that at the same time today, in the midst of the Israeli attacks, the vice president did say something that sounded very positive today. The vice president said on a new IRGC CENTCOM conflict reduction channel in Doha, the Iranians were like, fine, we'll send someone from the IRGC to hang out in Doha with someone from CENTCOM, and that's how we're going to settle a lot of these disputes. I gotta say that the technical wordage here inspires much confidence. It almost reads like a Californian girl with like a very nasally accent would say this, honestly, like, I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, outside of that, while the vice president's saying the de-escalation is going to be working incredibly well, the Iranians appear to be showing otherwise. The Iranians said today that they rebuffed more U.S. claims. According to MB Ghalibaf, America falsely claims our unfrozen assets will buy their agriculture. Interesting. The only crop we're harvesting is what you planted. Decades of mistrust. It's organic, abundant, and homegrown, but apparently the U.S. only exports GMO soybeans, broken promises, and trash talks. Then they went and blew up a boat inside of the Strait of Hormuz today, and we were able to hear that a Singaporean-flagged cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz was attacked by the IRGC. The attack took place near the coast of Oman after the Iranian Navy warned ships not to use routes through the Hormuz that have not attained Iranian approval. The UKMTO also put out a report on this incident today, stating the following. The UKMTO has received a report of an incident 7.5 nautical miles southeast of Dahi, Oman. A cargo vessel has been hit on the starboard side by an unknown projectile, causing damage to the bridge. The master has reported no casualties and no environmental impact. Authorities are investigating, and vessels are advised to transit with caution and report any suspicious activities, as usual, to the UKMTO. So Very interesting to note that the Iranians have attacked another ship today, and they did state, and we'll be getting to this here very soon, that if any ships go through an area that's not authorized, and that if the Israelis continue their strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon, the entire peace deal is going to collapse, and they're going to shut down the strait completely. We also were able to hear them broadcasting those threats today, once again, to more commercial ships that were getting close to the strait, as we were able to see on VHF 16 broadcast here on one of these vessels, the Iranians were still issuing threats not to pass through the strait.
Attention all vessels, attention all vessels, attention all vessels in Persian Gulf and Oman Sea. This is SEPA Navy warning. Transiting in the Strait of Hormuz is only possible with SEPA Navy permission and on designated routes. If any vessel attempts to transit in the strait without our permission or AIS off or outside of the designated route, it's responsible for any consequences of any danger. This is SEPA Navy out.
Damn. Instructions unclear. Full speed ahead through the strait. I couldn't make him out really right there. Also, why does the radio have a label on it that says "Hello's"? It says "Hello's Revenger." What the hell does that mean?
I think that's the ship like this thing is on.
Hello's Revenger. That's a hell of a ship right there. Hellraiser, they call it.
Let me see if I can find this thing. Bro, they got Arabian energy going on through. Let's see here. Trying to see if I can find this thing nearby to this area. I can't find it on here, actually. Maybe that's not the name of the ship. We got that. Let's see. We got that flora and that fauna out here passing through the strait. But the Hellas Revenger apparently is the one that received this transmission, I'm supposing. And they put that on there for the new crew members to know the name of their ship off the top of the head in case they had to communicate to someone else. But still, it is showing us that at the moment the Iranians are still issuing broadcasts stating that any ships that are going through the Omani waterways here on the south of the minefield are not allowed, and they have to go through the Iranian toll routes. And if we look at the traffic that's been going on through the day, it looks like a lot of ships are trying to use the Omani route, but an equal number of them are also still using the pre-approved Iranian toll routes. Look at them go. But that was what it looks like over the day. And then you can see right here at the end when it started to clear out, that's when the Iranians attacked the ship, and then most ships stopped making the passage because they weren't really sure if they were about to get hit or not, whether they were going on the pre-approved routes or not. But right now, a lot of people are talking about this situation with the Islamic Republic of Iran attacking a commercial merchant ship that took the Omani waterways over the day, and a lot of people are wondering what is going to be happening next. Are the Iranians going to start continuing their attacks against ships in the Hormuz and largely blockade it again, or are they going to make this a one-off and not conduct any further actions against merchant ships? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the reason why this attack right here is significant today by the Iranians on this ship is this is the first time since the MOU signing that Iran's attacked a ship in the Hormuz Strait. So this is significant for that reason. So what's going to happen now? 66% said Iran will continue attacking these ships, while 18% said the U.S. will start a new military operation, and 8% said Iran will probably back off after this attack.
Yes. So I'm saying that they're probably going to keep on playing it down and continue to try to talk. That's what I would say. But I mean, let me know what y'all think in the chat. And we actually have a shout out. Kim G, I appreciate the followee over there on Kick. Really appreciate it. I'd say Kick's coming up pretty good, man. The past few months, Kick's actually kicked off. No pun intended. But anyways, that is the show for tonight, y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed it. And that is the news for tonight as well. So at that matter, the phone lines are going to be closed momentarily. Right now, as we speak. But anyways, that, like I said, that is all we have. Make sure y'all hit that bell button so y'all get notified when we come on air. We're usually on air every day, so we had to take a little break for a couple of days. We had some stuff going on, so but usually we're on every day. If we have breaking news, we usually come on before 4:30 or at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time PM. But we usually are on air at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time to give y'all the updated 24-hour breaking news. But like I said, make sure y'all hit that bell button and so y'all get notified, and make sure y'all hit that follow or subscribe button, depending on what platform y'all on. We are on YouTube, Kick, Rumble, and Twitch. Like I said, we are actually coming up a little bit on Kick. Rumble is catching right behind Kick, so just to let y'all know that we are on other platforms. So make sure y'all jump over there and try to get over there on other platforms so we can actually start beefing up the subscriptions and the follows over there. But anyways, make sure y'all share the videos, and that is all I have for y'all. God bless.